Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. She can't believe she hasn't visited New York City yet, Leanne Hughes.
Hey everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into episode 28. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create workshops that kill. And by that, I mean you're creating really great experiences for the people in your workshops. And I think that takes a lot of work, dedication, and the ability to challenge yourself and think of outside of what you'd usually do, which is probably why you're tuning into the show. So well done, you. Now, in today's episode, you're going to hear from a good mate of mine, Joshua John. Josh has been living in the Kimberley region of Western Australia and has been working as a literacy, language and numeracy trainer at the TAFE. I believe in the USA the equivalent is a community college. It's actually a really challenging gig for trainers in the region. Some of the students are some of the most disadvantaged in Australia, and there's challenges in meeting just simple and basic requirements in terms of healthcare, let alone quality access to education. It's pretty normal for lecturers at that TAFE to drive hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres in a week to deliver training to students at remote communities. Now, the reason I asked Josh onto the show was to talk about these challenges, but even down to the detail of, what does he pack when he travels on the road? I also wanted to talk about his new side hustle in the world of MCing. Speaking of MC gigs, I'm lucky enough to be a co-host of the We Are podcast conference this year. It's happening the 18th to 20th of October in Brisbane. So if you ever thought of starting a podcast or you just like meeting people who love podcasts too, come along. Some of my favourite podcasters will be speaking at this year's event, the likes of Jordan Harbinger and Pat Flynn. I'll link to that conference in the show notes of this episode at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 28. Ronsley, the organiser of the event, told me over dinner that the quickest way to a podcaster's heart is through an iTunes review. I definitely cracked up because I think that's true. So I wanted to give a shout out to Claire from Nature Space for her amazing review on iTunes last week. Thank you, Claire. Claire had been approached to do some facilitation work, was feeling a little rusty and has been listening to all of our incredible guests, which is arming her with the tips and confidence to kill it at her workshops. So thanks, Claire, and good on you for taking the initiative to not only listen, but adopt some of the strategies our fellow facilitators are sharing. If you'd like to hear more about the podcast, I share some of my favourite tools and tips in my monthly newsletter called The Flip Chart, and you can sign up to that on the First Time Facilitator website. Okay, that's enough for me. Now on to the show. I'd like to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast my former colleague and good mate, Joshua John.
Good morning, Leanne.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for your time. It's great being in beautiful Broome.
Great to have you back and for a short holiday back in Broome.
Now, Josh, I'd love to start off with by, you sharing with the audience what you currently do and what you did in your past which enabled you to be in the role that you're in today.
Okay, at the moment I'm working at North Regional TAFE. I'm a literacy and numeracy lecturer. I work across a range of industries. That's kind of my daytime job. I've just recently this year started an events business called Rise Entertainment, and that's mainly around, event managing, MCing, and DJing. In 2007, I was holidaying across in Broome, as a lot of the stories always are, and I was out on a remote community and met with the school principal. I heard there was a job going, working in the school as a tutor, and I put my hand up and he gave me a call back, and that was my entry into the Kimberley, and from there, that was back in 2007. I've worked communities in the towns and all over the shop.
So that first sort of foray into tutoring, prior to that, what sort of role were you doing? And did you sort of have the education backing to become a tutor, or you just knew a lot about sort of industry, what was going on, a bit about literacy and numeracy at the time that enabled you to make that transition?
I was doing some volunteer tutoring in Brisbane, I think after uni, just to get my experience up. Once I finished my arts degree, surprise, surprise, the offers weren't coming in thick and fast for a Bachelor of Arts in Brisbane with possibly not the best results. But I was just volunteering at a doing some tutoring for high school students, and then I moved to Darwin, where I was just temping in different offices, doing kind of office work, and I just found that there were just a lot more doors were opening, being in a more regional area, moving from Brisbane to Darwin, and then I guess I knew that a possible move was also going to happen, moving from Darwin to a more regional centre. And like I said, that did happen, but through by chance, being on holiday in Broome, and that's how I kind of fell into education. I then started my grad dip in education to become a qualified teacher as I was working in the school, and that's how I got formally into education. And then after that, have moved into the TAFE system, into more training.
So the interesting thing about the show is it's called First Time Facilitator, and facilitation is really about getting the experience in the room, getting people to share that knowledge. And training is a unique skill set because you're actually there to pass on information. It appears to be more structured, but I know that in the Kimberley, and especially working in communities, things don't always go to plan. So I'd love you to tell us any stories or, some challenges or opportunities you've had while working remotely, what you've had to do a bit differently, and the kind of cohort that you're training.
I think it's the more remote you get, I guess you have a lot more freedom to do what you want to do, because people aren't watching over your shoulder. So you have a lot more freedom to get into, what the clients demand or what kind of works well for the client, rather than going out there and running, off-the-shelf product. You can go into a community or with a different group and working over time, work out what, their needs are and really adapt and modify a program that suits them. Probably the best example of this was I was working at a local cattle station doing some literacy and numeracy work, and then that evolved from essentially literacy and numeracy tuition into leadership skills and management skills, and the station themselves were really keen to get the station workers skilled up and exposed to some of these, ideas that you might get if you walk into a business course or a management course. I was bringing those out to this remote station and delivering it to these station guys, and it was, like I said, I had a few years to develop a program which looked completely different at the end from at the start.
Wow.
And it was interesting. They'd come in the morning. First class was at 6 o'clock in the morning. That'd be the first group. The second group would come in from doing the station work. They'd come in covered in dust and blood and all this stuff, and we'd kind of get stuck into it. They were quite keen because obviously they got to sit in an air-conditioned room for a bit rather than fighting cattle. And we went on with a lot of different concepts, which wasn't my mandate going in, but that's what worked with the group, and the station managers were keen to see, saw the progress, their staff enjoyed it, and it just kind of kept on evolving from there, and a lot of freedom and opportunity to do that.
Fantastic. So with these guys on the cattle station, and guys and girls, I should say, what's interesting sometimes when I kind of have workshops with people that are used to being out on the floor or being active during the day, they actually kind of struggle when they're sitting in a classroom. They're not used to the lack of movement. What kind of activities or, how did you talk about tailoring your content to suit this type of audience? Did you play any games, or what kind of things did you do with these students to keep them engaged and motivated? That's
right. Absolutely. Lack of movement's an issue. Yeah, we have it here with a lot of trades guys, and they come into the classroom, and then it's difficult. What happens is the facilitator or the lecturer is on their feet. They're walking from the computer to the whiteboard. They're walking around the room, and it's all the students essentially who are sitting in their seat. And as that facilitator, you don't actually realise that you're moving around, so your energy levels are staying up. The blood's flowing in your body, but for the people sitting down, that's right, the energy levels are going to go down. So I ensure that I place simple things just to get them to move. So instead of, one of the simple ones I do a bit is, rather than handing out maybe the worksheet or something like that and walk around to them, I'll leave them at the front and say, okay, when you're ready, go up and get that worksheet. And it's not because I'm lazy, it's more just to get them walking and moving, and they don't really realise that. And you have to keep on doing that, otherwise, that's right, people start to nod off regardless. And everyone knows if you sit down for a 3-hour lecture, it's really hard to keep it going. So you have to incorporate movement. But yeah, absolutely, playing team building activities where people are on their feet and working things out together. That's definitely where the type of training programs I like to design, because if you're training someone who's in a certain vocation, if you're training someone whose job is not to sit down and essentially do kind of office work, if you're training someone who's on their feet, then it's good to train them doing those type of tasks. So I've designed a few activities where people are on their feet, working in a team environment and essentially team-based problem solving, and really getting into communication. And one of the most important things across every industry is that ability to communicate. And that's where, I guess, where my training ended up really revolving around was communication and teamwork. And they were the skills we were able to run these activities in the classroom. And I designed them to be hard and the people would fail. And then we'd reflect on it, discuss what went wrong, and then would run it through again and saying, these are the skills we need to develop, and kind of have a bit of a laugh along the way in a space where people aren't being judged and they're not being stressed out about stuffing something up or obviously getting injured on the job. So having that classroom as that place where, no negative talking and if someone can't do something, that's okay. We're all working together and we're all obviously always learning and trying to get better. So,
fantastic. And do you find that you have to do a bit of kind of rebranding of the classroom? I think some people associate a classroom with school, and the way schooling's taught, it's very structured and there's right and wrong answers and you must follow this kind of script. So when you go in there and you're being flexible, you're getting people up and moving, is that something that you do to kind of move away from the connotation of this isn't school, this is an adult learning environment?
Absolutely. I think if you walk into a classroom or a setting and you hand out essentially assessments or workbooks, and it's all very literally black and white on the page, and people, they get taken back to possibly negative times when they were at school, and I think they would kind of switch off. So you've really got to shake that up at the start. The first activities, I ensure you're not asking them to write anything down. You're asking them to engage in the classroom, and the first thing I'll always try and do is get everyone to speak, which I know sounds a bit daunting for some people training. They're saying, it's really difficult to get my students to speak. It's difficult because they're used to not speaking, so they're not going to start halfway through the week or something like that. You need to break that straight away, and so the method to do that is allow them to speak about something that they're not having to rely on their knowledge about the subject and being found out that they're not an expert. So I have activities based around like, let's have a look at the difference between these two pictures, circle the difference, and then we'll go around. Okay, everyone has to say one thing which is different, and everyone can point and say, oh, look, this object is in this first picture, but it's not in the second. Just by something as simple as that, the individual has engaged, they've broken that, no one's laughed at them, they haven't got it wrong, and from that's the tempo of the class, and everyone's keen to go along like that. In saying that, you've got to be careful to ensure that the first person you ask to speak is that individual who's showing a bit more confidence. You're not going to show that the kid kind of at the back of the room who's trying to shy away. They'll be last. But what that individual will see is every other person in the class has spoken, no one's laughed, it gets to their turn, they're able to say something, and it's more part of that desire to be part of the group, that no individual is then going to go against it and not speak, that they're like, okay, everyone's doing it, I'm going to be part of the group, there's no repercussions, and they're engaged, and then from there, the classroom environment is working well.
Wow. So I really so you're talking about creating a safe environment where everyone feels like it's okay to speak up. And I like that you mentioned tempo as well. It's the first time someone on this podcast has mentioned tempo. But I think a lot of facilitation and training is really about how do you mix that up. So at the beginning, you're setting a nice, safe tempo, but there'll be times where you're putting people and challenging people, increasing that rhythm, then bringing it back when you reflect. So I like that you brought that into it. I also want to touch on your time, I think it was in Darwin, or was it in Brisbane, when you were doing stand-up comedy. Can you please tell us a bit about that experience? Why did you start doing that, and what did you learn from it?
It's a very short-lived career of stand-up, so but no, I do enjoy. I guess I grew up performing on stage. I grew up playing musical instruments. My mother's a musician. So from a very early age, I was just on stage tapping a drum or something behind a group of people, which you just get so used to it being on stage.
Josh loves the microphone.
I guess I don't shy away from it. It's something that's just always been there. And then in school, my eldest brother, when I was in year 8, he was in year 12, he actually wrote the school musical. Yeah, I just always found myself performing on stage to some extent. I entered, a comedy competition, Raw Comedy, in Darwin, and then I was the finalist there, so I travelled to the Melbourne Comedy Show and performed there. So, yeah, that was probably the biggest performance I've done inside of an audience. Yeah, one of the interesting takeaways from that was right before I went on stage, as I was sitting essentially behind the curtain as they're introducing me, I just remember thinking, I've completely forgotten my first line. And my mind went blank. And I was like, in those situations, it's just good to stay calm, because that's kind of how the body works. I knew I delivered these lines before. I was well prepared, but it was a massive audience. There was camera crews, etc. Mine went blank, but yeah, I think the takeaway there is that's how the body, that's how the mind works before you do something new. Before you get on stage, even for myself, who's someone who's, been on stage a lot, I still get nervous. And particularly when it's something I'm doing for the first time, and I still get those nerves and jitters. I guess maybe the difference is I not embrace them, but I guess I just I put up with them and know that's part of the gig, and you go through with it. So I guess that would be my advice to people who are, presenting for the first time. If you're feeling nervous, well, everyone feels nervous, and it's only when you're doing the same, gig or the same facilitation to the same clientele group, after about 3 times, you'll realise, then the body just starts to relax and you don't get that heightened state of awareness before. You don't get that adrenaline shot before. But like I said, it's if I do a different type of gig, then yeah, I'll be nervous before I go on stage. But it's something I think is just always going to happen to individuals, and don't let that kind of, be a barrier for you to think you're not cut out for being a facilitator. I'd be surprised if there was an individual who didn't feel that. I think it's the case for most people.
Yeah, I agree. It is the case. And I thought it would be easier as well, and that every time I still get nervous. And I've spoken to facilitators and trainers on this podcast that have been doing it for 20 to 30 years. And the second that you change up the client, change up the content, it always comes back. So then what drives you to appear on stages or appear in front of workshop rooms and teach people?
I guess it's one of those things, and I guess most related to my MC work. Some people say, you're MCing, you like to be on stage, you like to have that microphone. But I think the real skill of a good facilitator or an MC is someone who can get the event rolling and functioning well. And often that means doing less on the mic and not being up there to kind of listen to your own voice. And it's about being effective in your timing and what you're saying and I guess the tempo of the night. So while it's kind of counterintuitive, I don't mind being on stage, that's not the draw. The draw for me is the excitement in facilitating, is getting the event rolling well. And nothing is more annoying or frustrating as seeing, a facilitator or an MC who's up there, who likes the sound of their own voice and they're kind of showboating and around. That turns everyone off instinctively. So the skill of a real facilitator or an MC is to be able to make it seem natural for the audience and make the whole event fluid. And a lot of the time, that's not spending time on the mic, but actually getting other people up there and kicking things along, keeping that pace going.
Fantastic. So when you let's talk about emceeing an event. What kind of prep work do you do prior to that big night, that big day?
The number one thing you can't go without is having a list of the names and checking you can pronounce them correctly.
Yes.
So, and as I said before, often you can go up and then everything just disappears out of your mind. That's just the nerves kicking in, and that's when you'll forget the individual's name or their position. So I always have, I guess, a list of the key people and then a really simple running list. And from there, it's just a bit of, I guess, ad-libbing, but essentially you're able to refer what's coming up next and what needs to be said at that point in time. But just having those, obviously you can't stand up and read a list of notes, so your notes are very simple, and you're able to get those key points across, and then the rest is just ad-libbing on the night.
Now you've got an uncanny talent. You're very lucky that you can actually. I have never seen hecklers around you, but you can bring in these jokes just in the right moment at the right time. Where does that come from? Is that just something that Josh has in his personality, or did you kind of have these jokes in the back of your mind before you got on stage? Where does it come from?
Humour is an interesting one. I think, like I said before, if it's good to be prepared possibly with a few jokes, but nothing would be set in stone where it's like, at this point I'm going to say this gag. It's a lot of the time I'll skip over them. You need some content. It's not all just ad-libbed. You need some content there, but it's all about reading the room. And humour, sometimes it like I said, it can seem very lame if an individual's up there and they're telling a joke that they think is funny. If the room's not ready for that, or it's not the right point, you need to restrict the humour. But in other times, that's right. It you can just feel the audience. Is just building and everyone's listening to every word you say, so then it's a lot easier to drop a little word in there or a look or a glance which is funny, but that's only because at that stage, at that point of the night, that works, and you need to be, like I said, I've definitely skipped over jokes or things I've written out just because they're not everyone, it just wasn't the right time, and it's about reading the room and just doing what's right at the right time.
Excellent. So let's skip and go back to the remote training environment. I'd love to hear what you pack, what you find is essential when you're training people in a remote area. What do you put in your car?
Some of the most important things I take out, it would be you've obviously got to think about how many people you're training, but usually with me it's around the 10 mark, so it's not a massive audience, and obviously if it was big I'd have to take more activities, but in saying that I'd take a projector if I had more clients, but if it's smaller groups, I'll just have a laptop there, definitely like a portable whiteboard, quality speakers. In most of my facilitation I'll always have short clips of videos that I can put up there, because it's you need to break up who's speaking and the content rather than me driving all this information and content. It's great to go, here's a little 2-minute clip of an individual maybe introducing a topic for the first time or just an interesting little activity. Because like I said before, it's easy then for the individuals and for everyone in the room. If we watch for example, you could put on a short clip of people arguing in a customer service environment, and then it's very easy to go, hey, what went wrong here? And it's quite easy, and people feel confident in saying, hey, that person was rude to that person, or this person did that, etc. It's very easy for everyone. It's not confronting because you're talking about people on the on the computer. You're talking about people who aren't there. It's easy to identify that behaviour. And then from that, we can say, okay, take those points out, rather than me standing at the front of the room for a number of hours saying, don't be rude to customers and it's bad and they'll have an argument. So always, taking visual short videos. Like I said, quality speakers to get all around the room. It's something that the person sitting at the back of the room needs to be able to hear it, or they'll completely switch off. And I guess it's always good, no matter where you're delivering, I think, is to get a sense of the room that you're going to be delivering in. I guess reorganize that room so it's efficient. You might be pushing all the tables to the side, having a big open space. You might put all the desks in circles, etc., etc. So it's important to just be well prepared. Yeah,
fantastic. That's great. So you had some advice to first-time facilitators, and that was about keeping calm and just making sure that your preparation enables you to deliver when it's the big moment. Do you have any other advice for those starting out their facilitation journey?
Advice for first-time facilitators: it's all preparation, and I guess give yourself enough time to get your presentation ready. Run that past someone who can give you that feedback. And then it'd probably be, don't try and squeeze too much information into any presentation. Sometimes I chair a meeting here and we have multiple presenters all the time, and people will have a 3-minute slot, and they'll have 15 points that they're trying to make to tell people. And what you need to think about is, where is my presentation? Where is that in the sequence of events for that day? Because if it's all morning and there's 10-minute slots and you're one of those 10-minute slots, but there's 5 before you and 5 after, no one has the capacity to remember the 15 points you want them to remember. So write your presentation first, but then go back and clearly be able to define what are your key takeaways. And they need to be able to you need to be able to explain those things very simply, and they need to be very obvious from people going away. And like I said, if you're doing a professional development week or professional development day, at the end of the day, how many things can you remember from that day? But if you can be really clear and succinct and explain your concepts well and easily, people will remember that. Oh, I can remember, that guy was talking about behavioural management or whatever it was. So it's good to really break it down and don't try and, I guess, add more information in to make it appear that you're right for the job. People try to stick in so much content, and it's too much. It's like a tsunami of information, and it just overwhelms people, and it's hard. The brain kind of turns off. It's like, well, there's too much information here. I can't handle all this. Even if I'm writing down a few notes, it's too much. It's coming too quick. So less is more. Break it down. Introduce the key concepts very simply. Then, like I said, show a short little video of that concept, maybe in action. Break that video down and talk about it in a more complex way, but then also bring it back into a more simplistic way that, like I said, everyone can understand. And that's the way to get your point across. And then people will walk out of your session going, that made sense.
That's really interesting, talking about the order of proceedings and where you are in, say, over a day, and if you've given a short period of time. And I think what it's really about there is being memorable, is what you said, but also think about what everyone else is doing, and they'll be doing is what you think you should be doing, which is cramming information down. So to be remembered, what you have to do is something that's a bit different. So it could be just telling a story for 3 minutes, bringing in that video, something that no one else has done, and immediately, if your key takeaways are obvious, people will remember. So I think that's just the key for everyone, is when you're in a day and you're one part of that, try and forecast ahead and go, all right, well, this is the agenda. This person, we're talking about A, B, C. Where can I come in? What can I do to bring it to life? So that my 3 minutes, everyone remembers that at the end of the day. I think that's critical.
Absolutely, yeah, no, that's right.
So Josh, where can people find you if they want to talk to you and find out more?
I'm on the World Wide Web. I'm on Facebook, Broom MC and Wedding DJ. That's my events business. It's called Rise Entertainment, but that's the search you put in. And yeah, I'm up here in Broome delivering training to Northwest Australia. Yeah, I guess that's probably the main contact.
Great.
Yeah.
So you can find the links to Josh's website and his LinkedIn profile and other details on the show notes for this episode. But Josh, thank you so much for your time. It's great to reconnect, and I love that you have this side hustle of emceeing, because you've always been asked to do it within the workplace. So it's great that you're doing it for the public as well.
Absolutely. And Leanne, you're thinking back on, I guess, knowing I'd come in today and talk about some of my, things I've been doing with emceeing and event management. A lot of those things that I've actually got into is because of yourself. We've worked together. You were the creative driving force in a lot of those activities. You got me a lot of those gigs. You put my name forward. So, I'd like to thank you for, it was your creativity a lot of the time, which I guess opened some of those doors to going, hey, geez, these things need to happen. Someone needs to do it. Well, I'll do it. It kind of created the opportunities. So, on behalf of myself and everyone in Broome, I've just got you a little token of appreciation. Got your little Broome Cycles hat, the local cycling shop. So it just says Broome on it with a nice sunset. So you can take that back to Brisbane and all your travels overseas and just show people beautiful little Broome.
Oh, I will. We'll have to get a selfie after we've recorded this and pop it on the show notes. You can see the hat there and a photo of Josh and I on the show notes. Thanks for that lovely compliment. And I'm proud to be part of your career development. And let's check in a couple of years and see where we've both gone.
Looking forward to it.
Cool. Thanks, Josh.
See you, mate.
Thank you for listening to the First Time Facilitator podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you'd like to keep up to date with all the episodes, make it easy for yourself and hit that subscribe button in your favourite podcast player. Leave a review in iTunes. Every bit helps. Thanks again and speak to you all next Monday.